sharing with you what is a quick introduction to prompt engineering and specifically writing quality prompts both for Stable Diffusion and for Midjourney. We're also going to talk about other generative tools as well, for example, training your own models and a little bit about text generation as well, but we're going to primarily stick with image generation today. My name is Evo Haining. I have a design lab and gallery in California called Reality Craft. It is just south of Pixar. I'm in the Bay Area in California. And I recently wrote a book called Prompt Craft, which is a guidebook to generative media tools of all types and how to get started with the language of that. That is currently available on Amazon Kindle for free if you use Kindle Unlimited, or it's also available in paperback. I'm currently working on the next version that will be out in about a month. So we're going to explore a little bit of prompt craft today for the White Mirror community. For those of you who are creating new types of media and stories, we're going to be exploring a number of different tips and tricks you might take into your work, including characters, settings. We're going to talk about concept design and how to bring some of these things to life. These crystal cats being one example of a piece that I did a couple of months ago for a character study. So we're here basically to help you create the worlds you want to live in. I want to help you think about being very intentional about the worlds you create, whether those are protopian or solar punk or other version of White Mirror. I want you to think about how every word you put into a prompt brings something new out of it. And so think carefully about the kinds of words you want to use. Reality Craft itself is a design process. We're not going to go through the whole design process today, but we are going to explore some of the pieces of it so that you can engage in those for your own world building. So obviously, when we are creating a new story, there is a lot of world building, and prompt craft, specifically writing a good prompt, can help realize and design that world. We're going to explore a little bit of how to do that, both through words, but also through parameters, images, numbers, and even characters like emoji. So when we are getting started in image generation, if you haven't had a chance to get into Mario's workshop, for example, this is how you get started in Midjourney. This is the command line basically prompt, but you do it in Discord, specifically to the Midjourney bot. And so you're having a conversation with a bot that is generating from your text. Typing /imagine is how that starts. There are other commands as well you can do in Midjourney, but this is the starting place. When you're thinking about forming a prompt, there are a couple of different elements, and we're going to explore those really quickly together. This is a simple formed prompt in Midjourney. It has three components. You'll see at the front are URLs for images. Those are reference images that can be brought into any generation. There is also text. So in this case, a field of tulips in the style of Mary Blair is what we would call a cluster or a snippet of text that is a description both of the subject of the work, but also of the style. And then the pieces at the end where there are two dashes and no farms, those are parameters. And we're going to explore each of the parameters just a little bit today, not in detail. When you are going through the generation process, we start with writing a prompt, and in Midjourney you get 4 images, and then from there you do what we call upscale and variate. So that's U and V. The U upscale will take a smaller image and make it larger and more detailed. A V, in this case variation, will take the exact same. If you look at this grid of 4 and you think of it as top left 1, top right 2, bottom left 3, bottom right 4, you can then make a variation of any of those 4 pieces, and it will then take it in 4 new directions. So when we're working with Midjourney specifically, it may take many variations to get closer to the type of design you have in mind. Frequently, the first round isn't what you want, and you have to go through and refine, remix, variate, and then do a number of other tricks like blending. So we're going to talk through some of these sort of quick topics of image generation. These are a couple of images I did a month ago that are blended images in the sense that I used both a physical reference image and I also used my own art and brought them together into a composition. So when you're thinking about bringing together your own composition, a prompt, in this case in Midjourney or Stable Diffusion or any of the open source versions that you might choose, a prompt is a series of words, numbers, and other characters that express an idea that can be generated. That's pretty basic. These are the types of things that are going to go into a prompt. There is number one, content type. So in Midjourney, that might look like poster, sticker. It might look like the kind of media you are trying to get out the other side. Because if you give it some indication, if you need a die cut, it's going to give you things that are potentially die cut. Content type will help refine the generation. Description is the cluster of information, the actual scene descriptor. If you can imagine like reading a script and the first 2-3 lines of every scene are going to describe the scene. That is what's happening here. They're actually describing the subject, but also potentially the background as well as the foreground. So the field of flowers or the cat riding a bike, that is the description of the actual subject of the piece. Style, style word might be referencing a style of art like Art Nouveau or Impressionism, Surrealism. It might be referencing a type of artistry or a place where art exists, like Art Station. It can also reference a specific artist, as you saw in the Mary Blair example with the flowers. Style words are used very differently depending on whether you're in Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, or other tools. Obviously, there is some movement in this space. And if you're using Midjourney V5, you may want to put your style words at the front, as this can improve. For example, if you're trying to get to a non-photo image, putting your style words at the top can help it be less photorealistic. With Midjourney and with Stable Diffusion as well, you're going to find that different versions have different quality types, and you're going to learn to work with those over time. But V5, the current latest iteration that's out, is deeply photorealistic by nature. So that's what happens when you need to go to a more illustrated style or something that is more artistic. You need to let it know upfront what type of style. Now, composition words are going to be anything that would be used in stage direction or cinematography, something like a two-shot, a close-up, a lens type as well can also be included here. And then parameters. And we're going to talk a little bit about parameters because those include things that specifically modify an algorithm. So when you are trying to write a prompt, Midjourney can take 50 words or more. It can take, I think, 4,000 characters now. Frequently, people start with writing a prompt that might be 10 or 20 words and then adding to it. So you can do that through the variations and through what we call remixing in Midjourney, where you are basically adding layers or adding words to your prompt every time in order to refine it and get closer to what you're going for. So don't stop the first time. That's the key here. You want to experiment. You want to think about writing prompts that surprise you, that have a little bit of an element of perhaps mystery to them, right? So if you use a short prompt, for example, a 3-word prompt here, this is confused, surrealist, dripping. I've used there an emotion word, a style word, and a very evocative word. And that combination, and you can make that combination about anything you want, that particular combination, an emotion, a style word, and something evocative, that is a great place to start. And then from there, you can begin to really include all of those other elements that you know want to be there. So if you're thinking about how you are going to experiment with these tools, this is Stable Diffusion versus Midjourney, basically 2 versions ago. So Stable Diffusion is on the left, Midjourney is on the right. Both of these were taken from an image from an Art Nouveau magazine. This would have been a turn of the century French scene. So you can see what both of them did, quite different artistic styles. They interpret things like Art Nouveau differently. So you may want to try more than one tool. If you're not getting the art you're looking for out of the first tool, try a different one. If you are trying to figure out within your prompt language how to go from one tool to the other, Prompter Guide, and this is prompterguide.com. Prompter Guide is developed by a guy named Shane, and this is an amazing tool. It's in a Google worksheet, but basically it has tons of drop downs. So if you don't find that you have the language for something, or you have a great prompt in Midjourney, but you want it to work for Stable Diffusion, maybe 1.5 or 2.1, you can switch between them here. So this will help in the formation of your prompts. There's also a visual notebook and a way to keep track of things that work for you here. So I'm going to encourage you. It's a donate if you find it useful tool. So please donate if you find Shane's tools useful for your own work. I do recommend trying to keep track of your prompt craft, specifically the words that work for you. Right. So I know that I like working with labradorite and I like working with iridescence. So these are words that I come back to, whether it's for a fine art concept or for a world building concept as well. So just a quick summary. Image prompts, they work in Stable Diffusion, they work in Midjourney, they work in lots of different tools. An image prompt is a really great way to build on your existing body of art. In Midjourney, you can also blend up to 5 images at once. And so you can take existing art and a character and try and blend them in new ways to come up with new types of compositions as well. So these are ways in which you can begin to create variation or maybe explore an idea that you want to go deeper in, whether that's something lifelike, like a concept design piece like this, or it's something more abstract, or for something maybe a concept development, or in your storytelling, trying to figure out how to bring something to life differently. So specifically when you are doing the world building work, I want you to keep track of the language that works for you. That could be specific art periods or styles. Using terms like year and then the date can help. It helps if you're trying to get to a particular period of time as well. So let's talk a little bit about those parameters, the pieces at the end of an image prompt. And these are what we call algo mods or algorithmic modifiers. They are used to improve what you get out of the generative tool. They work in Midjourney with 2 dashes, but there are ways in which they also work in Stable Diffusion and in other tools as well. The syntax and the grammar has changed just a little bit with these, but in Midjourney, you'll see they're always formed with these 2 dashes and then no space. If you're trying to do, for example, what we call a negative weight to get something out of your image, you use the word no. So here it's no farms, so that no farms show up in the picture. And then the other 2 parameters that you see just after on the right side here are IW, which is image weight. That's how much emphasis to give the images at the top of the prompt. And then the second one is AR, which is aspect ratio. Very important for a filmmaker. You might want to keep everything you do in a 3:2 or a 16:9 aspect ratio. So common aspect ratios work very well. You can use a ratio on these, as you can see here with the tulips, but ratios are also normalized. So you can use a pixel count as well. You would just form that this way, dash, dash, AR, 1920, 1280, use 1060, whatever you're going to use there. So pixels or ratios work if you are trying to get to a specific aspect ratio. Trying to generate for a landscape or a vertical video layout, I would encourage you to start there. Start your image generation with the same place in mind. Start with your aspect ratio and then keep going all the way through. This is going to help you, for example, if you have design ideas, not just through a deck, but also into video and other forums. So these were some concepts from a recent piece I did. I end up using these as Zoom backgrounds. They're very useful for that kind of thing. And everyone's got their own spin on what's going to work for them. So I want So these are some of the interior concepts I've done. These are very low res. So you can see I haven't even upscaled these to a max size yet. And you can see what happens with a square image. It's going to end up looking too grainy. So if you're trying to get to something that looks more sort of magazine designer quality, you might, again, start with your aspect ratio in landscape mode, and then you're going to need to upscale these images quite a bit. Upscaling is what's going to get you closer to what you're going for in terms of your quality long term. So it's from the same sample. This is Midjourney V5. You can see that Midjourney is getting a high degree of quality with light. You can do quite a bit with shadow now. You can do quite a bit with concept ideation and set building. However, these are going to be 2D images, and you might want to build a 3D environment from that. So just to summarize, if you're trying to use these tools on your own, locate that URL. You can even bring it up to the Midjourney bot. If you're trying to do an image prompt for the first time, you can just send it to Midjourney and then copy and paste the URL. And then this is how you form that prompt. And then you can add your own text. You can even add emoji and other things as well to it. So again, Midjourney lets you remix up to 5 images at once, and that's called a blend. So all of these things are things that you can experiment with. These are recent experiments from Midjourney V5, and I wanted to give you a sense of sort of where you can expect realism to appear at this point. V5 is not perfect. As you can see, the elder woman on the right has a necklace piece with no chain on it. Things like that do still happen, and most of what you're going to get out of Midjourney might still need to be refined. Also, you can go and then take it out into another animation tool. This is, for example, in what is Revel XYZ. Revel and Kyber are both short animation tools that will work from a single image, and they are built on the same tools that we've seen at Deforum. So if you're familiar with Hugging Face, for example, some of these tools are in the Hugging Face community as well. So just wanted to give you some samples of ideas that you might want to take into your own portraiture or storytelling, thinking about whether you want a photorealistic style mixed with an art style, or maybe something that looks more sort of pop art. These are pieces I did playing on ideas of pointillism, as pointillism and stained glass and other very painful to make it physical art. I tend to like to explore that space. I also find drag is a really great place to experiment with the edges of an image generator. So thinking about your character design as being a very detailed art experiment. This is where Midjourney V5 is right now with drag. And if you're trying to get specific to, for example, a character that might be beautiful, but from a very specific culture, I want you to think about using the words from that culture. For example, prompting for a woman, in this case, from her native language. So using the word beautiful from the language, whether that's in Arabic or Japanese, you can see what that does. Just using the language creates that distinction of where that woman is from. So these are the kinds of tools you can think about using in your own writing as well. These are for a concept I'm currently working on, which is a new album. And so we're thinking about ways in which characters come to life in very broad ways. Midjourney is great for humor, and you can see you can get a fair amount of juxtaposition and realism. So getting a cat to ride a bike, for example, these are things that weren't really possible until a couple of weeks ago in many of these tools. They were very tricky to pull off. But as you can see now, Midjourney V5 can get a cat to ride a bike, and then you can animate that as you wish. So if you are taking your art and then building what we call a training model, I teach this in an advanced topics workshop, and we're not going to go into too much detail here with screen sharing, but you can go to a handful of tools. One of them is scenario.com. Another one you might want to try is Leonardo.ai. So Scenario is built for those who build games. And so you can train a training model on your characters, your gems, your backgrounds, every aspect of the game you're building. If you're using Leonardo, you can do the same. You're just creating a training set of your characters, let's say, in this case, the crystal cats, and then I can just generate endlessly off of that training set. So if those are the kinds of challenges you're trying to sit with, I'm going to encourage you to check out tools. Scenario.com is great for the game designers. Leonardo.ai also includes in painting and out painting and canvas tools. There are some other great painting tools out there, Playground and others that some of you may be using. So I'm going to encourage you to keep